Yuma, good evening everybody. Welcome to the National Library of Australia. My name is Luke Hickey. I'm the Assistant Director General of Community Engagement here at the National Library, and I'm really pleased to be welcoming you all here tonight for our much anticipated Life Behind the Lens discussion panel. Before I continue, I would like to ask everyone in the audience to please check your mobile phones are off or on silent, probably including you, Mike. We are capturing tonight's broadcast for the ABC Big Ideas as well as streaming live, so please make sure that those are off to avoid capturing your notoriety forever. We come to you tonight from the National Library of Australia here on beautiful Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and a place that I was born on and grew up in, and very privileged to live here. I would like to acknowledge Australia's First Nations peoples and the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we're meeting here today, and give my respects to their elders, both past and present. I'd also like to extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us tonight or watching online, but also extend that respect to the many cultures and stories that we have privileged to be custodians of here in the National Library's collection. Tonight's event brings together three of Australia's best photojournalists, Mike Bowers, Lorrie Graham and Rick Stevens. Tonight we're going to hear from them on the field of photojournalism, its past, its present and its future, experiences from their distinguished careers. It says long here, Mike, but I won't reveal any age, no discrimination here, but also why photography remains a key part of making history. I'm sure our panel and their work is familiar to many of you, but I'll give you a brief introduction regardless. So our host tonight, Mike Bowers, is a photographer and host of Talking Pictures on the Insiders, which airs on the ABC. He's spent 37 years in the Federal Parliamentary Press Gallery, working for publications including The Australian and the Sydney Morning Herald, and has covered a wide range of international conflicts, including Cambodia and the Middle East. He's also a published author and most recently a curator, having guest curated our Fit to Print Defining Moments from the Fairfax Photo Archive exhibition, which I really encourage you to see, and which we must thank Mike for his efforts, not only in curating, but also in promoting and sharing that widely for everyone to see. Lorrie Graham began her career at a photographic lab, and at the same time was shooting concerts for Australia's nascent Rolling Stone magazine. Lorrie became the first female photographic cadet at the Sydney Morning Herald in 1975, a cadetship which was only offered to women because it was International Women's Year. She became a trailblazer in a notoriously male-dominated profession, working for several major publications in both Australia and the UK, until embarking on a successful freelance career in 1991. Her image of Paul Keating brandishing a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses for the cover of Rolling Stone is one of her most iconic works, and her work is held in the collections of the National Gallery of Australia, the National Portrait Gallery, the National Library, and the Museum of Sydney and State Library of New South Wales. Rick Stevens' journalistic career began as a 16-year-old copy boy for the Women's Day magazine in 1961. Rick started as a press photographer with the Sydney Morning Herald in 1963 and took the iconic photograph of a devoted Labor supporter bending to kiss Gough Whitlam's hand at the Blacktown Civic Centre during the 1972 election campaign. That won the Nikon Best News Photo of the Year in 1973. And since then, Rick has won numerous awards and covered major local and international stories, including Cyclone Tracy, the Bali bombings, royal and papal visits, the Barcelona and Sydney Olympic Games, and the wedding of Mary Donaldson to Crown Prince Frederick of Denmark. Rick is currently a freelance photographer with a special interest in capturing wildlife on film. As a very amateur photographer and all-round photography nerd, I'm really excited tonight to hear about the stories, the experiences, the opinions and reflections. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mike, Lorrie and Rick to the stage.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the National Library and Life Behind the Lens. More than any other sport, except perhaps maybe surfing, action in cricket happens a really long way from the lens. And necessity being what it is, the early days of photography of cricket involved massive blow-ups using just standard lenses. And the results from that were pretty ordinary, especially for news once it got into a newspaper, because it was a massive blow-up, definition and contrast was terrible, and it really wasn't much of a result. So before the commencement of the 1920-21 Ashes tour, a photographer who worked for the Sydney Morning Herald called Herbert Henry Fishwick was not satisfied with what we were getting from cricket, and he wrote to an optical company in London called Ross, and he ordered a lens to some specifications, and it was about 1 metre long, this lens. And he attached it to his Graflex camera. And
My God.
the results from this caused an absolute storm amongst the newspapermen and the cameramen of the time. So much so that the English touring cricket team took these photographs back. The definition and clarity was unheard of. And they, when they got back to London, the London newspapers sent their senior photographers out to see how it was all done. And really, I can't find an earlier reference to long lens photography. It was kind of born here at the SCG, at the Sydney Morning Herald. And there's Fishwick wrangling the camera. He had special binoculars on his glasses, as you can see. And that was so he left both hands free to be able to wrangle the pretty complicated camera. That sort of DNA, where the photographer was unwilling to accept the status quo, kind of got baked into the Sydney Morning Herald. And if we fast forward 6 or 7 decades, the people like Lorrie and Ricky were the ones that took the ball forward with that. Both of these photographers have been an inspiration in my career. I just want to quickly read, I had the pleasure of doing the citation for Lorrie when she was inducted into the Melbourne Press Club's Media Hall of Fame. And trailblazing is kind of an imperfect label for her. The citation attached to it read, "Lorrie Graham blew away the ceiling of the male-dominated world of Australian press photography in the early 70s. Dozens of other women followed in the next 40 years. After knocking on the door for a few years, she was employed by the Sydney Morning Herald in 75. As mentioned, it was International Women's Year. She battled suspicion, sexism, hostility, but she preferred to let her photographs speak for her, and very loudly they spoke. In the late 70s, she was attracted to The Observer in London because the paper's dedication to strong imagery allowed pictorial essays to stand on their own merits without a story attached, and this became her hallmark. Lorrie's won numerous awards, and her archive is currently being acquired, or has been acquired, by the Library of New South Wales." Rick's career was briefly outlined, but what they didn't mention was that the poor bugger has really had the misfortune to have to work with 2 generations of Bowers. My father, he was one of the preferred photographers that Rick liked to work with. And they did a story in the 90s where they unearthed a thing called blue-green algae on the Murray-Darling. And my dad won a Walkley for it, and I think Ricky should have been really winning a Walkley as well. So I thank you for that, because I know you played a very large part in that, Rick. Both of these guys I found an inspiration in my career, and Ricky has mentored me from an early age, and a lot of my success is due to what Ricky taught me. Lorrie, what's your earliest memory of photography? Can you pinpoint when you first saw it, this is actually what I want to do?
Yeah, my dad gave me a book by Margaret Bourke-White when I was 14. And she was the first life photographer. She wasn't the first female life photographer, she was the first life photographer. And there is seriously something in you have to see it to be it. So I realised that there was a job called photojournalist, but it took a bit of time to get there for me from that.
Ricky, what about you? Can you pinpoint the time you
Well, there was no real light bulb moment for me, because I started my career as a wall and floor tyer with my grandfather, and we were living in Manly, and they decided they wanted to go back to England. And I said, oh, I don't want to go there. And I was 16 years old, so I had to get myself a job, otherwise I was made to go with them. So I got myself a job through a friend who put me onto somebody that worked at Fairfax, and they were a copy boy. And I said, well, that sounds all right. Saves going back to the UK with my grandparents, because I was adopted by them when I was 6 years old. So they chuffed off, and there I was, waving goodbye from Circular Quay going, I'm 16. I said, what have I done? What am I going to do now? Anyway, so I worked as a copy boy for 2 years with Women's Day magazine, which was then owned by Fairfax. And the editor of Women's Day said, Rick, you've been here for 2 years, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, I wouldn't mind being a cartoonist, but I can't draw. I wanted to be a policeman, I was too small. I said, but it's got photographers around there, maybe I could try that. So she said, look, I'll get you in there as a copy boy, and maybe we might get you a cadetship. So I chuffed around to the photographic department, and they finally gave me a cadetship. And I thought, God, that's good. I better learn something about this. So I borrowed a camera from a few photographers, because they didn't give me a camera when they gave me a cadetship, did they?
I got a camera.
It's because that's who you are, you see. I was thrown in to mix up the chemicals. So anyway, so he gave me a camera. It was one of those twin lens reflex things where you look down in there like that and you're looking up the subject all the time. And I used to photograph all the hobos that around the boarding house where I used to live, and it just made good footage. So I used to practice on them. I'd just come home from work and I'd go around with the camera and start taking pictures of them and things like that. So that was my first introduction to photography. I didn't have no idea. I thought I was going to be a wall and floor tiler, but I didn't. So.
Lorrie, you entered a very male-dominated workforce. I mean, there was no such thing as a copy girl, right?
No.
So it must have been a very hard... Like, these boys weren't easy. They weren't easy when I started. I can't imagine they would have gone easy on you when you started.
I was a gentleman.
Always a gentleman. Look, I mean, it wasn't... No, look, it was me and 60, so it was pretty kind of uneven.
60 men.
There were 60 photographers.
So that would have been the Sydney Morning Herald, the Sun Herald, and the Sun newspaper.
And the Sun,
yeah. And also darkroom people. So they had, people working in the darkroom. And it's a really hard thing to describe, because basically sexual harassment, those words didn't exist, so it's...
Yeah.
So the environment was a little tough. I mean, when I got my cadetship, basically I got it because I'd been coming and showing my pictures to Frank Burke for a couple of years.
Who was the picture
He was the picture manager, and I'd been shooting for Rolling Stone for no money, just, free tickets and film. And he'd always look at them and he'd say, yeah, but we don't have any cadetships and we don't have any women's toilets. They had 2 men's toilets, mind you. We don't have any women's toilets on the floor.
There was one on the 5th floor, though, wasn't there?
Yes, but you had 2 toilets on the 6th floor. You won't be, the language, you won't be able to handle language. And the equipment's so heavy, there are all these excuses.
Yeah.
So 1975 rocks around, and I think it was actually his secretary, Jenny White, who kind of nudged him and said, you really can't now. You can't say no to her now.
It's International Year of the Woman. You need to put a woman on stuff.
But I had to come in for 2 weekends in a row to see whether or not I could handle the language. And I had to rock the dish, which I don't know if anybody actually understands just how hard that is. So rocking the dish on a weekend on a newspaper, there's a lot of sport, and basically 8 photographers come back at the same time and they're all processing, and they throw pieces of photographic paper in the dish, the developing dish, and you, rocking the dish, have to scream back, you're on the wrong grade, you're over, you're under, try and save the print. So imagine the abuse.
Yeah.
But I handled that. I mean, I managed to kind of get through it. I mean, my language has never improved after those 2 weekends, but I got my cadetship.
Let it be said that this is being recorded by the ABC, so we're all on our best behaviour.
We're all on our best behaviour.
All of us don't have great language normally, so we're on our best behaviour.
Yeah.
Now, the darkrooms, you had your own personal darkrooms at the Herald, and it was called Alcatraz.
Well, no, we were shared. We had shared cells.
Yeah.
And it was called Alcatraz because basically it was this corridor and these cells went off. How many were there?
Oh, I've never been in a prison, I wouldn't know.
You were there? I think there
It was
were
probably about 35 or something.
35 cells.
Yeah.
And so you shared it with another photographer.
It was in a T shape, so it was a long corridor there, and then there's another little corridor coming off there. And there was dark rooms on either side, and it had just a sink, developing tanks.
Developing tanks, where you kept your gear.
Yeah.
Where the blokes kept their pictures.
Dirty pictures.
My darkroom still holds a record for the most people in there for one party. And they used to smoke too. It was terrible.
So you had open dishes of sodium thiosulfate for fixing, and you'd be smoking in there. That must have been very good.
It's a very healthy environment. And we all had brown nails.
Yeah, from the developer.
Terrible.
I want to go through the biggest mess up you've ever done. I'll start to lead you all off. During the 93 campaign, which was Hewson v Keating, I shot for about 3/4 of a day, and I thought, boy, this film's lasting a long time. What I'd failed to do was properly engage the leading tail into the sprocket and wind it properly so that it... But having said that, when I did realise, I did never make that mistake again. Okay, now I've let off...
1975. By 65? 75? Yeah.
I don't know, Ricky, this is your
No,
story.
it was 65.
It was 65.
It was 65. I know his story better than he does.
Maybe we'll get Lorrie to tell it.
1965. There's bushfires in Victoria. I think it was 1965 bushfires. And there was one of our senior photographers by the name of Ron Stewart was covering the bushfires there. Anyway, he'd sent up some rolls of film to be processed. It was 35mm. So the packet of film comes in and the picture editor calls out, Rick and Merv being Merv Bishop, who was the first Indigenous photographer to work at the Herald. And Merv and I were both cadets at the same time. So when we get back to talking about those long corridor of individual darkrooms, Merv comes into my darkroom. We've got 2 rolls of film. Now, if you understand about processing 35mm, there's a roll of film there, and the photographer's always left a little sleeve out of the film, so you didn't have to break over the cassette to get the film out. So what you did, you just pulled it like that. So I'm here like this. Merv's there, the light switch is here. You right, Merv? Yeah, Rick, I'm right, let's go. The picture editor's banging on the door and he's banging on this. How's that film going? Yeah, we've got it under control. Switch off the light. Oh, damn, I just dropped my spiral. There's Merv with his roll of film out, looking at me like this. Oh, sorry, Merv. I switched the light back off after I picked up my spiral. Let's go.
So basically, one half of that film was exposed to light.
Not quite a half.
Right.
Yeah. About a quarter of the film.
So you had pulled it out, or Merv had pulled it out?
Merv had pulled his out, but I dropped
switched the light on.
I dropped my
So this was
spiral, so I had to turn the light on.
This was completely your fault.
It was. And so and the editor, the picture editor is still, he's still knocking on the door and he's saying, "How's that film going?" He said, "Yeah, it won't be long, boss. Mine's fine, but Merv's got a problem." So we didn't actually tell anybody. But we didn't tell anyone about this. So the film comes out. Okay, a quarter of it's fogged. Mercer said, what are we going to do? We'll just cut it off. So we cut it off. And we took it out and he said, well, I need this and this. And I said, hang on, I've got captions here for this and I can't see it. I said, oh, we forgot about that. We forgot they got captions. Anyway, so nobody ever said anything, so we just continued on. So, I mean, there was a bit of a...
That was a good one.
Yeah, it was.
How about you, Lorrie?
Yeah, mine was kind of more... Do you remember when... so this is post the Whitlam Kerr thing.
Dismissal.
And Kerr, yeah, the dismissal. And Kerr, everywhere Kerr went, they wanted pictures. And he went down to Jarvis Bay to do a kind of... I guess it was a sort of military outing thing.
Yeah.
And I thought I got the picture. It was basically him with the mascot of the troops that he was Navy, that's right. It was a dribbling bulldog.
Right.
And he was walking with the bulldog in front of the... And I thought, got it. So I raced off to the bathroom on a toilet break and I came back and the shot that actually somebody from the News Limited got was the bulldog sitting on his lap. Dribbling. So I got back and Frank said, where's that picture? And I went, oh.
They're the worst words you can ever hear from your picture editor, isn't it? Where's that picture? Or do you have it in vertical? It's like, no, boss, because I didn't have time to turn the camera sideways, you idiot. But anyway.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think bladder control is one of the big things that I've learned from my career. I'd say it's one of the most important things you can have as a photographer.
Yes. That and comfortable shoes. Both these guys have taken what I believe to be the iconic shots of Laurie's got two, Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, and Ricky has one of Gough Whitlam. Just run us through the shot you took at Bankstown Sports Club in 1972, I think it was, of the lady kissing Gough Whitlam's hand. And the details are that Bob Hawke is, of course, in the shot as well as little Paddy and...
Cole Joy.
And Crean Senior.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they set me, actually. It was probably because I was working night work, because all the juniors, used to work night work, and all the seniors used to...
Get the good shifts.
All the good shifts and all the good jobs and something. So I was pretty lucky to get out there, but it was... I never ever thought about, ever being a political photographer or anything like that, but, we got out there and the atmosphere on that night was something I'd never really come across again, while I was taking photos. And I mean, the place was packed, but it was dark, like this. And the audience, it was just, and Gough's up there, and we're all shuffled down to the front, and I'm down the front there, and Gough's up here, and all the people are behind me. I'm saying, I'm shooting straight up Gough's nose while he's speaking. I said, it's not a good look. So I wasn't allowed on the stage, and so.
Since when have you ever followed the rules?
Well, they did give me the nickname. I used to have a nickname. They called me the Rat, because they used to reckon that I used to scuffle around like a little rat sort of thing, getting into corners where I shouldn't be.
His nickname is still used today. We call him the Rat.
So anyway, I said, no, this is no good. I've got to be able to see all these people in the background here. But it's dark, and Gough's got a light on him, and how am I going to balance that? And I don't like flash photography. I hate flash photography. So it was one of those situations where, being the time it was, 72, I had to use a flash. But I had to compensate and try and shoot at a very slow shutter speed, because I needed to get the people in the background. So I snuck up, past the security, and there was a curtain. There was a curtain like this, exactly like this. So I got up behind there. And I thought, this is a better shot, so I'm taking a few shots of Gough talking. And then this woman, Dorothy Scott, races up and grabs him by the hand, and he leans down, and I'm going, oh, yes, bang, bang, bang. Oh, no flash. The flash hasn't gone off.
Flash would have killed that.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Flash would have absolutely
Exactly.
killed. So it was an accident. You're telling us you won a War Clear Award on an accident.
But nobody knows.
Nobody
So
knows now.
anyway, the flash hasn't gone. I got, oh, God. And it's not instant now. You know, I mean, it's instant now. You look at the back and say, oh, I've got nothing. But you don't look at the back. You've got to go all the way back to the office in Broadway.
Must have been a nervous drive.
It was very
Were you working out your excuses? Boss, I missed it.
Well, nobody else got it,
Nobody else got it.
Yeah,
they
right,
wouldn't have
yeah.
known.
Right.
So, well, the cameraman did. There was a TV.
If you're the only one there, it didn't happen.
So anyway, so I went back and we'd go through the process. I made sure I didn't turn the light on when I was pulling out the film. So I put it in there, and then it came out. Oh, yes, I've got an image. But there was two images. There was two images, and exactly the same, but one didn't have Bob Hawke in it. So I must have moved around a little bit to get, or gone that way to get Bob Hawke, because I've got another image and Bob's not even in there.
Cole
So
Joy's got his back to us, Ricky.
Oh.
No, he hasn't. No, little Paddy's got. That's
Little Paddy's got
Paddy.
his back to
Yeah,
us.
Patricia Amphlett, yeah. So Hawkey must have snuck in there while that was happening to get in closer. So, look, lucky. Lucky. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's bad luck. Merv had bad luck, I had good luck.
Merv had bad luck because he was in the dark room with you.
That's right. Yeah. So, anyway, yeah.
Lorrie, I think this is the iconic shot of Bob. Did you see it as soon as you got there?
I saw the potential of that shot when I walked into the Opera House, but it took the entire time to get it. And if you looked at the proof sheet, that's the only frame. There are 3 proof sheets.
So you shot 3 rolls.
I shot a lot of other pictures, but
3 rolls of 36.
there are other pictures amongst it, Rick. Like, Hayden looking miserable. There are a lot of pictures where because I was working for the National Times and I had to get a shot that was going to last a week. It wasn't going to be a news picture, it had to be something else. So
I did some time on the Sunday Age too. You had to shoot quite differently, didn't you?
You had to be thinking, this has got to last, and it's got to have a different angle, and it's got to have something else going.
So you couldn't take a photograph. When you worked for a Sunday or a weekly, as the Nation Review was, you had to get a picture...
National Times,
sorry. You had to get a picture that wasn't going to be in the paper the next day because it would feel old by the time it was run. So you really had to exercise some creativity to get different things. And were they happy?
I don't think Hawkey ever liked it, no.
No.
I think they also made a big... Apparently, a couple of people said that they always used to check the mics.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
They never had that
It's very rare that happens nowadays.
That mic sort of situation ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think they learnt their lesson.
He didn't mind shooting up his nose. That's a lovely
I can't see Hawkey would have been too enamoured with that.
No. No.
Ricky, what was this is your Bob Hawke photograph. What was the circumstances? He's standing on a chair here. What was going on?
I think he was just racing to get back up to the stage or something. I can't remember really.
Where was it?
Yeah.
Where was it?
It was in Sydney,
Yeah.
the Opera House.
Definitely your flash went off there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
did go off there.
Yeah. I think did he have bare
Oops.
feet?
Whoops.
Sorry?
No, he's got his shoes on, hasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he got shoes on. Hazel was still around. So I think this is the actually iconic photo of PJK. Just tell us the circumstances. You shot it for Rolling Stone magazine. It was in your studio.
It was in my studio, and we'd had a shoot with him at the pub where his band, what were they, the Ramrods or something?
Yeah.
When he managed a band. So we'd had the morning with him, and then he was coming to my studio in Surrey Hills after that. And the studio, I lived in the studio, and illegally. And anyway, he turned up with his Xenia suit over his shoulder, and he walked in and he looked around and went, "This is a little bohemian, Lorrie." And I blacked it out because there was also a potential that we might need a colour shot, and they needed it to be quite controlled.
Yeah.
So it was quite hot. It was January. And so I had a fan, and he didn't want the fan on because it was going to wreck his hair. And then we're sitting there, and I decided not to put film in the camera. I shot it 2 1/4, and I just figured it was going to be all sort of white knuckles on knees for the first half hour or something.
So you warm into a shoot, basically, and especially during it's okay now with digital, but the first 30 frames for something like this
would be a waste. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I had the idea for the shot before, and I had 3 lots of different sunglasses with the idea that he might play, but we also had to get rid of his minder.
Who was?
And Summers, which wasn't easy. Anyway, told her that they were really bad parking police around where I lived, and got rid of her. Anyway, I mean, she actually loves the shot now. Anyway, so I gave him. I just said, well, I mean, we did the white knuckle shot, we did the jacket off. We were trying absolutely everything, and it was just like, I said, maybe a prop would help. So I gave him this, and of course he went for the Ray-Bans immediately, and he just, played around with it. So. And
how many shots do you reckon are usable?
Of, I'd say probably about 4 are of various, the sunglass ones. Yeah. I mean, he did that, looked out over the top of them. We've got sort of like different sort of variations of them.
Yeah, it's one of the better covers that I've seen of a politician. So well done, you too. That was the best I could achieve for Keating and Icon. It was the 96 campaign, and he heard some school kids screaming when he was inspecting a church which had been burnt out at Parramatta, and he ran across the road. And you've never seen anything like this, because we realised he was going to get up on the wall. So there's cameramen with lenses flying out of their pockets. We used to wear those camera vests at the time. You can see Andrew Taylor on the other side there, and there was film and lenses and stuff, because we all had to get up on the wall to be able to get a decent shot of him, and the TV guys were sort of dropping cameras, so it was anarchy, and I had to shoot with the camera out to get some angle on it, and I had to send the films back and had no idea if I'd got it, but there was one frame. So. Rick, we've all had assignments which have really affected our careers and have been sort of a breakthrough moment. You went out to Richmond Air Force Base in Christmas Day 1974 and you never came home for 5 weeks. Just run us through how you ended up covering Cyclone Tracy in Darwin.
Again, a lucky break, being the junior photographer, working Christmas Day, where cyclone happened. Nobody knew in Sydney how bad it was. We thought the first reports we had, there was 10 dead, and then there was 20 dead or something. So there was very little staff in Fairfax at the time, but the chief sub, a guy by the name of Bob Howarth, said, "Look, we're going to have to try and get there, but first we've got to go out to Richmond and take a photograph of the Hercules, taking up all the emergency equipment, generators and things like that, because there was no power, there was no nothing." We went out there and we heard that a Hercules had already left with power, and there was the ABC was on board, and I think the Telegraph was on board, but they'd gone. So we had to do. Bob House got on the phone to Canberra and said, "Look, we've got to get a crew on there. We've got to go." My wife Paula, who's also a journalist, was working on Christmas Day. She was down on the 5th floor working, and I rang her. I said, "I think I'm off to Darwin. I'm not going to be able to make Christmas dinner tonight." So in the end, we got on the flight, and it took off, and we arrived in Darwin, first light. It was just, they had, there was just enough light for us to land. And I stepped off the plane, and there was just mayhem everywhere. The planes were upside down, and everything was going on. People were being gathered, the people were being taken out. And, I think, what am I going to do here? How am I going to get my film out of here? There's no power, there's no water, there's nothing I could do. So I spent about an hour and a half at the airport as soon as I landed and photographed everything I saw in sight. Planes thrown into the hangar and things like that. Then I saw these people being evacuated. So I grabbed photos of the people being evacuated. And there was a guy on a stretcher. And I asked the people, I said, where's he going? Where's he going? He said, well, we're taking him to Sydney. As far as I know, he's going to Sydney Hospital. Good. Give him this film and tell him as soon as he sees the doctor, tell him to ring the Sydney Morning Herald, tell him he got film. That was the only way I was going to get film out. And then because there was no way of processing. There's nothing I could do. It's no good having great pictures in your camera and not being able to do anything with them, is it? So, and they got out. And they got to Sydney, and the Herald was contacted, and they went to Sydney Hospital, they picked up a film, and they developed it.
Jobs like that where you have to really think on your feet and...
we had there's no accommodation. I actually, if it hadn't been for Bob Houth, we probably would have slept on the street because Bob Houth was from that area. That's why he came. The chief sub came with me. We didn't have any journos on that day, so the chief sub came up there, and he knew a guy who worked for Qantas, a guy by the name of Danny Rafiki, and Danny Rafiki then was able to get my film out for me. And I was sleeping on the floor of his house at the same time. So I mean, you don't think of those things when you go. You get there, you get your image, then you got to get it out. It can be.
It's a glamorous job.
Yeah, it's really glamorous. Did you have a job which was a defining job for your make or break your career, or is there something that sticks out in your memory where you thought, well, that was really a very important job that I did?
Well, I think there are kind of areas of work that I've done that I think are probably important. Did a book with Robert Millikan on the rural crisis in the 80s. That was pretty important to me. Those sort of bodies of work I think are pretty kind of defining for me, rather than just one image or one assignment.
And is that what attracted you to The Observer, the fact that they were one of the pioneering publications that just did photography as standalone?
They did they respected it. They actually used they had a great respect and they would design the pages around images. When we were still working at the Sydney Morning Herald, you'd fill a hole that the subs had left.
Yeah.
So things would be cut to fill the hole as opposed to sort of, letting the image speak for itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, The Observer was incredibly important, and also it was, it only had 5 photographers, it was a weekly. They had no problem sort of sending you away for an assignment for a week. They gave you time. They respected, everything was always bylined. There was this thing where no image was ever printed without the black neckline around it. And when I came back and started working on the National Times, I introduced that, which the subs hated me for.
Way to go, Lorrie. So the black neckline is the bit created by the shutter gate to prove that this is the entire negative. So when you see the black neckline, you know this is a print of exactly what was exposed in the camera.
You see that car in that picture?
Yes.
I borrowed that for 3 days.
Which one?
That one on the right there. The one in the middle.
The one that doesn't have any...
The Fairlane.
Yeah, the Fairlane, yeah. Yeah.
That was the
transport,
Sydney Morning Herald car.
I said I'd give you some photos afterwards, and if you give me your car. True.
It's strategically placed there, Ricky, I see.
No, I didn't place it. No. I even remember their names. That was a
Speaking of
Manning
bylines, if you've been to the exhibition upstairs, you'll notice there are very few bylines because photographers never used to really get them on their work. One of the few people we know who shot a lot of that stuff upstairs was Herbert Henry Fishwick, who used to sign his negatives with HHF and circle them. And if you have a look at some of his prints, you'll see actually on the negative printed into the work HHF, and he used to circle it HHF. Ricky, you had a great deal to do with getting photographers on parity during the 70s with journalists because they used to get paid much less than journalists.
Oh, yeah, a lot less, yeah.
And mixed up with that, of course, was the recognition with the bylines. Could you just tell us a bit about how that fight unfolded?
Well, it was the AJA then, which is now the Media Alliance, and sort of said, so we, a group of photographers, we got together and we said, look, I think, why are photographers paid so much less than journalists? I mean, we're just as smart, really. So we are, aren't we?
Sometimes smarter, I reckon.
Is that right? It's true? Yeah.
Paula's Rick's partner is in the front row here. The partners of photographers are the ones that suffer the most because we're away for such long periods, and the long-suffering Paula Goodyear there.
Yeah, well, Paula's a journalist, so she understands it. So it wasn't too bad. But anyway, back to parody. Yeah, so a group of photographers, Ian Mainsbridge and myself and a group of photographers, we sort of used to hold meetings together and say, look, we've just got to get into the AJA's ear and say, look, that we just need to try and get an upgrade in some money because we were paid far less than journalists. And lo and behold, we won our case. Nobody thought we'd ever get it, but we got it, and now we're getting paid more than the journalists. So.
Are we?
No, not really.
I'm not sure that's true, Ricky. Lorrie,
yeah, so, yeah.
Lorrie, this was during the Drover's Dog election, I think you could call it. My father told me that John Button, who was the one who delivered the news to him that he had to step down in favour of Bob Hawke, had told him that he retreated into his private space and howled like a wounded animal, was what my dad told me. So it was a painful experience for him, obviously. And this was, where was this? And
That was in the audience when Hawke was
giving his speech. So was it this at the microphone event?
See, I didn't shoot all of Hawke.
No,
I was busy doing other stuff.
It's. I think you can see the pain on Bill Hayden's face as he's watching what he described as a drover's dog could have won this election. So well done there. Rick, you photographed lots of royal tours. This was Diana Spencer. What you managed to get this and none of the Fleet Street press did.
Yeah, that's why they called me the Rat. You see, so what's happening there is that we were on a train in around Adelaide. And it was heat wave conditions, and obviously Diana, and that's her security guard behind her, had decided she wanted to get a bit of fresh air. But I'm sure she wasn't accustomed to the heat of Australia. But it was really, really hot. But we were in a. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. We were in a carriage in front of her, and at no stage did I take my eye off Diana. So I could see her, but I couldn't really photograph her. But I saw her get up. And I thought, well, there's only one place she's going because there was no bathroom on the thing. So there's only one place she's going, that she was going to come out to the door. So I raced to the back of the carriage and got the only window spot there was. And she came out, and that was as soon as she opened the door, that's what hit her, and that was the look she gave me. And I thought, that's the picture.
Because it looks like
She looks like she's crying.
She looks like she's crying.
No, she's not. It was just the heat.
Oh.
It was just the expression on her face when she felt the heat, because the train's moving.
And how did our colleagues from Fleet Street react?
I was their best friend after that, I think. So again, a bit of luck, but it's one of those things that it's not just about turning up and looking for a picture. You've got to think a little bit, and you've got to move around. I mean, if if there's 10 photographers over there, you don't want to sit with 10 photographers and all get the same picture. You've got to move away. So, I mean, that's basically the way I used to operate. I try to get something a little bit different. You know, a bit like Lorrie does when we were working for the, you know, the National Times, because that was, you know, she couldn't produce the same picture as me.
No.
That must have been a dream job, Laurie, because...
Was a dream job.
How many photographers worked for them?
Me.
Me.
Just
Was
you.
it? Yeah.
Then it turned into the Times on Sunday, and I got Pete Solness and Pete Ray to come over.
Peter,
But that didn't.
Ray.
Peter Ray didn't last very long, because that's when Warwick and Lady Mary decided to try and expand Fairfax
By bankrupting it. Well done. This would fall into the category of having to survive the normal shots of...
Yeah. Well, this is also because it was an election campaign. There are 3 shots. It's a trilogy.
So the John Howard trilogy.
It's a John Howard trilogy. So the first shot is, I should have actually done the 3 shots, you sent these 3 shots, is just the eyes over the edge of the thing. That's the middle shot, which got basically used the most.
Yes.
And then there's the final shot with the big smile.
Yep.
And then we could kind of reverse them depending on how he was going in the polls.
So you got a selection of John Howard just to suit any headline, basically.
Yeah. He didn't like those either.
Rick, you spent a lot of time in the forests around New South Wales.
Yeah, that was up near Dorrigo there.
It's lovely.
So these are what the forest processors used to set up to try and impede the progress of
logging
bulldozers and logging trucks. And they were tripods made out of really long pieces of trees, basically. I hope they didn't cut them down.
No. Ian Cohen's up there too. Do you remember Ian Cohen?
Yes.
He also...
He was a Greens MP.
He was hanging on the front of a warship too, in the middle of Sydney Harbour. Yeah. Cohen was up there as well too. So yeah, that's... I did that job with Paul Bailey, journo. So there were some nice images.
There are various journalists you work with who absolutely get what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah,
They're the ones you try to go out with, aren't they?
Yeah.
I had a journalist, Anne Davies, who was so well trained. She would interrupt an interview and say, well, the sun is about to dip behind the horizon and Mike will kill me unless I hand over to him now, because this is the light he wants to use. And that's kind of a rarity, isn't it?
My God, yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Anne Davies. Tony Stevens was another one who really got it.
That picture there, it looks so much better. If that was in colour, I don't think it'd have the same impact. I love black and white. I still love black and white. I think, you know, it was. You love black and white, don't you? I mean, it's
How much of your archive would be black and white as opposed to colour, Laurie?
Probably about 65% of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually went digital. I have John Swainston to thank.
John used to run the Nikon dealership here, Maxwell Optical Industries, for many years, and he's been a great friend for photography over
Very
the years.
great friend of photographers. He lent me I got sent to cover the Boxing Day tsunami in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you've got to
shoot
have
digital.
a shoot. Great, I said, fabulous. I've never shot digital.
Yeah.
And John said, not just lent me the camera, he sat down and talked me through the camera before, which was very, very sweet and very kind of him.
Yeah, John's been a very close friend of
Photographers, yeah.
You supplied the Herald with all the cameras, didn't you? All the Nikon
Until we
cameras,
went to that other mob who
The other
begins
one.
with C.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
never did. I never crossed over.
We had no choice.
Oh, okay.
I think it was in 2000 when the digital system came out that we swapped over, because I think
1998 we got the first units because
I think
Canberra
the
was the first
digital
one to get them.
camera was a little. The other mob was a little bit faster, wasn't it?
The first digital cameras had a thing called shutter lag on them, and it was particularly bad for the sports guys because when you'd put your finger on the shutter and it would take a little bit for it to actually react. So the guys who shot tennis were telling me that they would put their finger on the button when they heard the ball being hit at the other end of the court.
No, I think when the guy was serving
Yeah.
to the guy, they press the button and the guy receiving would get it.
And by the time the shutter actually actuated, the ball would be in the shot at the other end of the court. So,
Is that right, Steve Holland? Is that right? Is that right, Steve Holland? That's how slow
we
it was.
had
wasn't
to we had to shoot the Olympics with these cameras, and it was a challenge, I'm told.
Steve Holland was my darkroom assistant in the 1983 Edinburgh Games, wasn't it?
That was a dangerous job then, obviously.
He's
This is,
Did you turn the light on him?
No,
as well?
he was. He was trying to print pictures, and it was in a caravan type thing on wheels. And every time somebody walked in, the caravan would shake, and so the image would be no good. He had to keep on doing it. Stand still on printing. Yeah.
Lorrie took a photo of my father, the journalist Peter Bowers, when he retired, and she turned up in his hotel room. I love this picture because he's in his underwear, and he used to spend a fair bit of his time in his underwear, and it's just so him. I love the image. Not so much my mother when it ran.
No.
She said, "Peter, you're in your underwear. What were you thinking?" But I think Lorrie nailed it. It's very much my father. So I love this picture, Lorrie.
Good. Well, it was one of the times he retired. So
Yeah, he retired a few
Yeah,
times,
he retired a few times. So.
Yeah. Rick, this is your portrait of Barry Humphries. Celebrities can be quite difficult, or they can be really easy.
Barry Humphries was probably one of the first celebrities I met, and again I was very young, and it's when you go and meet a celebrity with a name like that, I was quite nervous about the whole thing, but the story behind that was that was Barry's favourite room. And that was in the State Theatre in Market Street in Sydney. And the favourite room happened to be the women's bathroom. And I said, well, how are we going to do that? He said, just stay with me, we'll be right. We'll just wait till the interval finishes and we'll just go in there. I said, yeah, but... And I didn't know what was in there because I'd never been in there before. So
there's butterflies all through the roof.
Yeah, there's butterflies all through the roof. But I walked in and I said, but how am I going to get him up there? So I had to get a table with a chair on, and so he's standing on it. And I think I missed the picture because I think it would have made a better picture if I'd have left the table and the chair in
the shot.
In the shot, So I regret taking that one, but I still like it. So it was, but yeah, that was his favourite room in the State Theatre, was the women's bathroom. So.
How did he know about that?
Well, maybe he'd been in there as Dame Edna, I don't know.
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
Laurie, Rex
Well,
Jackson was a New South Wales politician.
Minister for Corrections.
Minister for Corrections. He was pretty much the pin-up boy for the phrase "colourful racing identity," right? And he actually went to jail, and you've actually managed a picture where he looks like he's peeking out through jail bars. How'd you manage this one?
Well, so this was for the National Times, and I was David Hickey, who used to spend a lot of time at the racetrack, knew that he'd be there at Canterbury, and this was the week before he actually went to jail. So, yeah, I was pretty pleased with it.
You know something, did you?
Just, you know how some people tell you stuff?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was pretty pleased with it. So the editor was pretty pleased with it.
I bet he was. Yeah, perfect for you going to jail next week.
Buckets. His nickname was Buckets.
Buckets, yeah, I remember that. Rick, you've spent a life... I had the pleasure of taking Rick out to Lake Eyre about a decade ago now, and I learnt more about photographing animals in that few weeks we were away than I'd learnt in entire lifetime in photography. What attracted you to animals? And you were we used to send you out to Taronga when we needed a nice picture for page 3.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually grew up in Zimbabwe, but I didn't, but I didn't care about photography then. I was of course, I was still going to school and everything, but I've always had a love for animals, and I don't eat meat, so I mean, and they know that I don't eat meat, so they're good to me. So, but yeah, I just George Lippmann, who was one of my mentors, you know, a great photographer that we worked at the Sydney Morning Herald, and one of his rounds was Taronga Zoo, and I used to come in on my day off when I was young just to go out with George so I could learn the trade, see how he worked, because he was absolutely brilliant, but very annoying. You know, he just would never say no. He would, you know, he would.
An annoying photographer, imagine that.
Yes, very annoying. And so I started taking photos there, and also my tech teacher, Harry Millen, used to be the zoo photographer.
Yeah.
I finished the job off him actually, but which didn't go down too well. But and I still do. I still do animal photos today, and I go out to Western Plains Zoo about 3 times a year and spend, you know, a number of days out there and just, you know, taking all their pictures they need and everything like that. And I love doing it because they never complain about having a bad hair day, you know. They never do. Never had one complaint from wrong side. Hair's not right, you know. So yeah. So,
I asked him once when I was his picture editor what attracted him to it, and he said to me, "Well, Mike," he said, "they never ask you for a print."
That's lovely.
And then again, a lucky shot. I mean, I
Stop saying that.
You're there with a camera,
Yeah,
getting 4 giraffes and an emu lined up in sort of height order.
It's the early bird gets the worm. So you've got to get up early, and you know, as photography, the best light's in the morning and the best light's in the afternoon. In the middle of the day, you can sleep. So I mean, because
He told me that when I was a pretty young photographer, you've got to get up and work both ends of the day. And I've got to say, I've kept that my entire career, and it does actually work.
yeah, I mean, photography's light. That's what it's all about, you know. And it's, you know, Australia, it's the sun is very harsh at midday, and you don't want to take pictures there. But yeah, they were heading off for a feed, and I just told them, "Can you go in that order?" And they did it. So yeah.
We'll open it up to questions very shortly, but I just thought we should briefly touch on AI because it scares the living daylights out of me. And I think it'd be great to have the reflections of both you on what you think is the future with AI photography, because it scrapes our pictures from the internet and basically can use them to do anything. Rick, have you got strong opinions on this? I think we shouldn't touch any publication.
I mean, one of the major problems with that, you know, you don't know what's real anymore. I mean, it's, you know, you know, I mean, every picture you've seen here today, they're real. There's no manipulation there. That's basically how it was shot, and that's the way. I've always been honest with the people that have viewed my pictures. That's what I see through the lens, and that's what you're going to get. I'm not going to fiddle with it. I'm not going to take anything out. If there was a poll between those, I probably wouldn't have published it. I just would have put it aside but you know, I wouldn't take it out. But I mean, today with AI, I mean, it's just, you know, you don't know what's going to be, what's real and what's not. It's they've got to come across with, you know, some sort of, you know, putting a watermark on it that's only visible by the computer. That the public wouldn't see the watermark, but then the computer will pick it up.
Some of these camera producers, like are putting a provenance item in there, so if you can prove that this is the original as it came out of the camera. I'm not quite sure how it works, but it seems to me like all the cameras are going to have to go down this path, because I've always felt that the great Lorrie Graham, who was publisher of the Washington Post after her husband Philip died, she used to quote her husband and say that newspapers were the first rough draft of history, and I've always felt that pictures are the receipts for those drafts. And they proved that the item, that the thing that unfolded actually happened, and you could fall back on them. But AI will negate that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can, you know, it's very hard to pick the ones that you see now, you know, unless they've got 6 fingers when they should only have 5 or something. But I mean, it's the problem actually is, quite scary.
I don't know if you saw during the Olympics, there was this amazing surfing shot where the surfer came off the top of the wave, and the board is perched perfectly beside him, and he's sort of standing there like it's posed, And the very first reaction to a lot of people on social media was that this was an AI image, and it wasn't. It was a completely...
No, it definitely wasn't. I would have liked that picture in my portfolio.
Me too. Lorrie?
I just think libraries and places like this are going to become increasingly important because
They're the provenance.
they're the provenance. Yeah. There's someone, and also I think probably getting to know photographers
Yeah.
is going to be increasingly
So the
important.
name is
the
the
name's
trustworthy
important.
part.
It's trusted. I don't know. It's terrifying.
I think it is.
I mean, it's used a lot in the platform that I use at the moment, but I never. It's there. It's in my Photoshop, but I just never look at it. You know.
Well, the final 10 minutes, we might open it up to the floor and see if anyone... We've got a microphone. Jen's got a microphone down here. If you want to just indicate, there's another microphone over there. And we'll try and answer them the best way we can. No one. Oh, yeah, there's one there.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. It was actually really exciting. Do you guys ever use iPhones? And would you ever use them professionally?
Yes. I've done many pictures on iPhones, sometimes because I've had to, but you tend to shoot a lot of video on your iPhone because when you do it, I just got back from Bougainville, and I was up there in '93 when the Civil War was on, and I went back to meet some of the BRA rebels that I was out in the jungles with. And this is, I took a picture of Romy Joel during '93 when he was fighting the PNG army, and I met up with him the other day, and I knew that they'd be asking for video with it, so I shot a lot of video, and it actually does a pretty good job. You can get a decent still out of it too. It's not like, you know, the image will fall apart. It's not great because it just doesn't feel right to me to not have a SLR at your eye level, but I use it a lot. What about you guys?
I used it during COVID. I shot entire COVID on an iPhone just because I was out walking.
Yeah.
And but I haven't used it kind of since, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I have it and I have Instagram, but not professionally.
I've got to say, I think my career would have been over a long time ago because people would have, some of the things I did, people would have got vision of it. And
Yeah, I mean, I use it, you know, to photograph my grandkids when they're being naughty and things like that. But it's not something that I. Well, as a matter of fact, I mean, my phone, the camera in my phone broke down a couple of weeks ago, and I had to buy a new phone because I just felt a bit naked without the camera working because I couldn't, you know, I couldn't scan anything, I couldn't do anything, you know. So it's, but I just use it for my personal use, family stuff around the house and things like that.
But there are photographers that use them exclusively. I know some guys that on Instagram that just use it, and they get amazing results out of it.
Yeah, it looks all right if you're looking at an image like that, but if you're going to blow it up or something, it breaks up a bit. I mean, it's...
No, because you can shoot RAW on them now.
Yeah, but it's going to take it. Yeah, okay. I don't know.
The big thing nowadays with the file sizes they are is data management.
That's huge.
You spend most of your time dumping your discs onto hard drives, and the data management is just woeful pain in the butt.
And doesn't it slow the phone down or something? I mean...
Yeah, no, it does. The reason I got it was because I wanted to do I swim at icebergs, and I wanted to do a kind of a diary of a year, and you can't shoot with your camera there.
Right.
So I thought, and they never stop anybody shooting with their
With an
phone.
iPhone, right.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to shoot it on my phone and use RAW.
Yeah.
I was reading something the other day, and I think it said something. Was it 40 or 60 billion photos are taken a year by people? It's a lot of photos to edit, isn't it?
It's a lot of photos.
A lot of students.
Anyone else? John?
Yeah.
Better not be technical, John.
No,
Better
it's
not
not
be
technical. Are you hearing?
Yeah.
Yep. There is a long history of library collections going back to the V&A in the 1870s, and always it was a print that was acquired by the library. These days, some institutions, certainly not knowing about this one, are demanding to have the raw file and nothing else. Surely the person who has printed a picture and toned it and done all that kind of adjustment to the picture to make this statement that they wish to communicate is lost if all we're going to get is the raw file. Do you have a view about that?
Well, my archive's just been acquired by the State Library and
That's a state library in New South Wales.
New South Wales, and those images the digital images are images that I processed. I mean, that's what they've got. There'd be no point in them getting raw files because it's something that I had to process. So, yeah.
Yeah, I hate handing over the raw files that I haven't actually worked on. And I don't do too much to them. I light and darken it maybe.
Yeah, same. I mean, I don't sort of manipulate
Yeah,
or do any of that.
I edit in RAW, but I just convert them to TIFFs.
I can't see the point of actually them having raw files. Really?
Michael.
I've just got a couple of online questions for our online audience, and we'll head up there. How hard did you have to fight to publish a shot full frame?
Full
Sorry?
frame.
Full frame.
Yeah, how
Full
hard did
frame.
you have to fight?
Look, one of the serious pluses, when I came back from the Observer, I got the job on the National Times on the editorial floor. So I didn't ever go back to the photographic department. And because of that, I had a level of control that wasn't possible. I don't know whether or not the Sydney Morning Herald ever went full frame and you could put a black line around it.
I never, in the 9 years that I was supposedly the boss of photography, I never won a fight as far as a photo went, never once, because the editors, the subs and the journos always thought they knew better. I can't remember one fight that I ever won.
No, I mean, it wasn't...
And some of it was like, we're going to take this person out of the photo in Photoshop. And I just said, no. And you'd go to the mat and you'd say, I'm washing. You'd throw a full tantrum, all toys out of the cot, and you'd never win. You'd never win with them.
It was a battle, but it was basically won. And we actually kept that line also on the Times on Sunday. None of our images were ever cropped.
And one more comment from online. A documentary filmmaker said her work was driven by the idea that visual storytelling and images have the power to change the world. Does this power still exist?
Yeah, of course it does.
I think it does, yep. If you get the right photo. The problem is that this sort of stuff is expensive. Going to Bougainville for 14 days was extremely expensive, and because media organisations they're in survival mode, and they're unwilling to commit like they did in the old days to funding visual excursions, I would call them, to where you can really get your teeth into proper photojournalistic work. And I had to tip a fair bit of my own money into this, and I'm happy to do that because I wish to actually try to do jobs that make a difference. The Bougainville people are fighting for their independence still after 32 years and all the sacrifices that they made, and there's important stories to be told in the Pacific, and it just gets harder and harder with media companies when they refuse. Well, I understand why. They're in survival mode and they don't have the money to survive, let alone expend it on these sort of projects.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the 60s when I started, I think, how many photographers? 60 odd photographers.
60.
And I think Fairfax...
60 men.
60 men, one...
And one woman.
Well, you weren't there then, so 60, so... But and look at them now, what, they got 12?
12, yeah. When I took over in 2001 as the pictorial editor of Sydney Morning Herald, there were 47 what they called FTEs, full-time equivalents. And so that has fallen from that in 2001 to there's 12 of them, I'm told, in 2025.
Yeah, I had a break from news photography in '88 when the Sydney Sun closed down, and
Let me put the subtitle in that. Rick took a redundancy.
I volunteered and took a redundancy because and 2 years later I had a free ticket for the Opera House, and I went down to the free ticket, and there was the editor-in-chief of the Sydney Morning Herald was sitting beside me, and he said, "Rick, good to see you. How's your buffy mate going?" I said, "Oh, he's good too." And I won't mention who he is. He said, "He's good too." He said, "Come and see me on Monday, will you? I want to give you Blake's another job." So my buffy mate, what he called was, went in and saw him on Monday morning, and he came back to our studio. We had a little studio in Newtown. We were doing freelance stuff. And he said, "Oh, look, they want us to come back." And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And he said, "Oh, I think I might go." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not really interested. I think I'll hang out for a little while longer." 2 weeks later, I joined him. So we went back, and we actually got double the money we were getting when we left.
And both of them took another redundancy.
And then we both took another redundancy 13 years later. So I mean, yeah.
We were working on a third when I left.
No, I'm not going back. No, I'm happy doing what I'm doing at the moment, and I do it when I am. And I've got 3 grandchildren. I've got 2 living with me full time at home. So I mean, it's I've got to give a bit of time to them now. So.
Right. Yeah.
We all know that there's been significant changes in both photography, technically, from looking at your exhibition that you pulled together upstairs, coming from glass prints through film,
From stuff shot on this,
through Tri-X,
yeah,
to digital and now iPhones.
Yeah.
And the same has sort of happened to journos being able to file. Basically, there are huge advantages in getting pictures out from anywhere in the world now, basically, as long as you can get satellite, access to satellite. And the technical advances have been great.
yeah.
But how confident are you? Now the marketplace is just full of images, full of blogging, full of words. How confident are you about quality journalism and quality photojournalism into the future?
Well, there are less and less of us around, and I think it makes you more valuable, not less, because good imagery tends to bubble up to the top. And you can have hundreds of iPhones in an event, but if you've got a couple of professionals there, the good material will bubble up, and you see it on social media, it rises to the top. And I think the fact that there's hundreds of cameras around makes you actually more valuable, not less. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with it.
Yeah, and there's also that weird thing that people constantly say, "This is a great phone and I'm going to get..." And you go, yeah, but the phone doesn't take the pictures, mate. I mean...
Yeah.
My real bugbear in life is when someone sees some of your work and goes, "Wow, you must have a good camera," like it's the camera that...
Camera just walked out there and took it.
Camera walked out and took it. It's like I traipsed through jungle to get that shot.
Yeah.
Yes, the old saying, "Give a man a hammer, it doesn't make him a carpenter."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. My other big bugbear is a thing I call journo tears. And journo tears are when a journalist writes a story and someone's voice cracks, right? Now, someone's voice cracks is not crying. It's voice cracking, and you can't show that visually. There are no tears running down their face. Their voice cracked. They got close to crying, but they didn't cry. When the editor or the sub reads the voice crack, you invariably get the call, "Where are the pictures of the crying?" And you go, "There was no crying." But the journalist has written this, and so photographers call them journo tears. They're non-existent tears, basically. So that's my big bugbear with it.
We shouldn't start down the path of journos. Really, I mean,
there's a couple in the audience I see. Karen, there's my good friend Karen Middleton there. There's no person. I don't think you've ever journo. You never journo-teared me.
I'd always get the phone call and the picture editor ring up and said, "Have you got a page 1 picture?" And I said, "Mate, if you put it on page 1, you've got a page 1 picture."
He actually... He actually said that to me once. I said, "Is it a page one picture?" He goes, "If it's put it on page one, it is, Mike." Yeah. Hi.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Journos have had a pretty rough time this evening. It has been great to hear the stories. I just like one reminiscence. I was a young reporter on the Sydney Morning Herald, and one day the Chief of Staff came running out and saying I had to get down to the Opera House with the senior photographer, Rick Stevens, in order to take a photograph of Dame Joan Sutherland and Dame Margot Fontaine coincidentally meeting at the Opera House. And I got in the car, the Herald car, and I had no idea what I was going to ask these two wonderful artists. And Rick said, "I've got a great idea for a photograph. Dame Joan Sutherland standing on the steps of the Opera House holding Dame Margot Fontaine in her arms. But you have to ask her." And I'm going, I can't ask her to do that. He had me going all the way down in the car. I was nervous as anything. We got to the Opera House, and of course he took a very superb picture overlooking Sydney Harbour or something like that. But he had me going all the way down.
Speaking.
That's why they call him the Rat.
Speaking about, you're talking about cars, that in the early years at the Herald, we had car drivers. We employed car drivers to drive us to and from jobs. And there was a fire down at Blackwattle Bay one day, and we had this two-way radio where you just spoke. This is all analogue days, so you had this two-way radio where you spoke to the driver, and you said. So we called him up and we said, "John, we need you to go down and have a look at this fire down at Blackwattle Bay. We'll be down." We go down to pick up the car. It's not there. We wait. And so we called him up again. "John, where are you? He said, "I'm down looking at the fire." I said, "Aren't you supposed to have a photographer and journalist with you?" But he'd taken off and he was just down at the fire. So anyway, we missed that job. So.
We've got to wind it up, but we might have time for just one more question if there's one. Yeah, just wait till the microphone. Oh, up there. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Good evening, and thank you for mentioning Harry Millen. And I think he invited you across the road, Lorrie, to talk to young photography students many years ago. But just to clarify the archiving collection, most collecting institutions don't want raw because they're often proprietary,
right.
So they're not guaranteed forever. Most of them take TIFFs, which are manipulated and tidied up.
Yeah.
And they're bloody big files too.
They are bloody big files.
We've just got one more down the front here. Can we have a microphone to this person here?
Yeah, I use TIFFs because the zoo use the images quite well, and they as big as that screen, and they come up quite good.
I just wanted to ask, where are your boundaries when it comes to privacy?
Well, this is a tough one. I certainly won't do anything illegal, but you've also got to be careful. You're poking your lens into people's lives at times of great stress. If you're in a flood and someone has lost their house and all their goods, or worse still, they've lost a loved one, it's a terribly confronting thing to have a lens poked at you. When I was younger, I used to just sort of race in, but I take much more care nowadays, and I think you owe a duty of care to the subject that you're photographing, and 9 times out of 10 they want you there. They want to tell their story. They want you to be able to share this terrible thing that's happened to them, but it happens sometimes that they don't, and you've got to respect that, I think.
It's
Oh, yeah. Well, politicians deserve it.
It's a difficult question there because it affects me sometimes. I had to photograph Walter Mick Hack, who in the Port Arthur massacre, and I wasn't very comfortable about doing it because he was really in a bad way, and but you know, you pick up the camera and you try and think, well, this is not real. I could never understand how somebody could do what they did, and it's very difficult. But I'm there to do my job, and I do it. Then I leave it up to the editor to decide what to do.
Karen was referring to the shot of the lodge with Keating showing Howard around the lodge, and hey?
Other way around. Keating showing Howard, yeah.
Yeah, Keating showing Howard around the lodge. So I talked about this with my father, and he actually predicted it. He said, mate, Keating will show, we'll invite him up. He doesn't do things that normal politicians do, and I reckon he'll show him around the lodge. So we worked out where I could photograph it from, and we may or may not have assisted the hedge growth with a bit of a spray. With a bit of a spray of Roundup in the months prior to it actually happening. We used to have this basset hound that Dad would walk down by the lodge. Psh, psh, maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't. Well, I don't wish to verbal myself on destroying federal land, Lorrie. But it's there was a hole through the hedge, and I managed to get a shot of him showing Howard around the lodge, and it was an iconic. I think it was an iconic moment. He got very upset with me because I was told something by one of his staff, and I put it under the caption once on an anniversary, and he got very, very upset with me. And let me tell you, you do not want to make Paul Keating very, very upset, because he has a certain way with words, does Paul Keating? Well, I think that's it for tonight. We want to thank you all very much. If you haven't seen Fit to Print upstairs, it's one of the better things I've done in my career. We could have actually had about double those pictures on the walls, but it feels very good to be part of a department that shows the early stages of photography, and I feel like we're standing on the shoulders of those early photographers who produced that magnificent work using really quite antiquated technology and glass plates. And if you haven't seen it, get along to see it. It's well worth your time. I want to thank you all for coming along tonight. I want you to thank these two icons of Australian press photography who have inspired me through my career, and I hope it's been an interesting night. Lorrie Graham and Rick Stevens.
Thank you.
On behalf of Lorrie and I, just thanks for turning up today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, and Mike.
Thanks.
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you so much to Mike, Lorrie and Rick for sharing your stories and your experiences. Particularly those tougher experiences and some of the things that you've described tonight as well. It really does go to describing that ingenuity that you had, the perseverance, all of that experience. And Lorrie, you chipped Rick about him constantly referring to luck. Big believer in good players make their own luck, and each of you are proof of that. Brilliant at your craft. Huge thank you for your contributions in capturing Australia's visual history, and we're so proud that you've got those collections, and those things are going to live on in posterity, even if they maybe are with some of our competition, Lorrie, but never mind, we can talk about that later. It really is a privilege to hear how you do work your craft and see that bigger picture in your life, and particularly that life behind the lens. So thank you again for sharing that with us all tonight. If you enjoyed this event, and apologies to the many questions online and in the audience that could have got to, Mike, as you said, we could do another 3 exhibitions easily on that. We could have done another 3 events on this tonight and not covered everything. But please tell your friends, keep an eye out on our What's On page for future events. You can rewatch tonight's discussion as well, which is on our YouTube channel, and find recordings of previous events as well. We'll also take this opportunity to let you know our final event celebrating the Excellent Fit to Print exhibition will take place on the 20th of June, which is an opportunity to sit down with Mike, have a 3-course meal with drinks upstairs in the library's Bookplate restaurant, with a 1-hour presentation from Mike, hearing a little bit more about his career, his work and his musings on life. And as you've heard tonight,
I'll tell the story of how we invented Insiders when I passed through Brussels with Barry Cassidy in the year 2000, and I don't know if you've ever been to Brussels, but it involved a lot of bars. So it's very...
I've seen some of that story, and that will make it a night to remember, trust me. So you can have a look at our What's On page for more details. Again, please join me in thanking each of our panellists tonight.